So at a time when building a PC can actually be quite expensive, particularly with the prices of graphics cards, CPUs, and now even power supplies and cases all increasing, it's good to see when we get some things that are at those budget prices. Now, of course, for anyone building out there, filling your case full of fans is usually a good option, particularly if you want to get a lot of airflow through your system. But considering that some of these brands now are actually charging up to £40 a fan, it can actually get a little bit ridiculous. And while browsing Amazon the other day, I stumbled across these, and I think these are actually a pretty decent thing. These are 120mm RGB case fans from Thermalright. Now, Thermalright are not the most well-known brand, but they are coming up, and they generally make coolers, case fans, things like that. And lots of people, particularly reviews that I've seen of their coolers, they're coming across as though they are a pretty good brand. And when I stumbled across these, and this is a pack of 3 fans for just £13, I couldn't refuse. So, and that's what we're going to do today. We're going to dig into them and see if they're actually any good. So these are RGB fans from Thermalright. They are the TL-C12C-S. It's a bit of a weird name for any kind of fan. And they are black, and you can also get them in white. They actually just have a W in the name. And they're actually pretty decent, particularly when you start looking at the specifications. They are a 4-pin PWM connection, which is great to see because it means it's not proprietary and it doesn't require any extra additional boxes or anything. And you also get a 3-pin connection for your ARGB. So they are ARGB, not RGB, which means you can get the nice fancy rainbows and things like that. I picked these up for about £13 for a pack of 3, and that is on offer, and usually they're about £20. So if the offer's over, £20 still isn't that bad. At £13 a box, obviously that makes them around £4 each a fan, and that's pretty cheap considering that nowadays fans can cost you up to £45, particularly for the nice ones with fancy features, side illumination, all that kind of stuff. But the specs on these didn't seem too bad, and if we just run through a few of the specs on them, they are a 12-volt DC rating, 4-pin PWM. The RGB is a 5-volt 3-pin ARGB connection, and that is a standard connection as well, so you don't need any kind of fancy hubs or anything like that. When it comes to noise level, it's a below 25.6 dBA, so that's actually pretty good. It means that they are going to be pretty quiet in the system, and they have a max RPM of 1500 RPM, so that's obviously not as fast as a lot of the fans out there, but it does mean that they're going to be pretty quiet because they can just slowly move. Now, at 1500 RPM, they're not going to move as much air as you would think, and the air rating on these is 66.17 CFM. So that's not bad, but it's not the best. But if considering how cheap they are and you can fully load your case up, once you've got all those fans in the case, pulling air in, you're actually going to get a pretty decent airflow. When it comes to static pressure, they are a static pressure of 1.53mm, which isn't too bad. It does mean that you can actually use these on radiators. You probably want to go for more of a push-pull configuration. And again, being so cheap, that's a great feature that you can do that, and you can add as many fans as you want onto your radiators and it'll work perfectly fine. And when it comes to bearing types, they are an SFDB bearing type, so pretty standard all round, particularly for a 120mm RGB fan. We'll open it up and we'll show you what you actually get in the box. So we get some screws. These are self-tapping screws, not unusual for any kind of fan system. And then inside here, the fans are actually individually wrapped up. We'll take one of the fans out and then we'll have a look at what kind of connections you get. So the fan that we've got here is a black design. It does have some rubber pads in the corners, and that's both on the front and back, so that's pretty good. So it's going to stop any vibration to the system once they're screwed down. They're not as heavy as I would have liked, but for the price, you're going to have to make some sacrifice somewhere, but they are pretty sturdy. There's no real flex in this, and there's no flex on the hubs or anything like that. On the back, we've got the general sticker, which gives you a bit of information about them. And then the blades themselves are in this translucent white, which means the RGB lighting is actually going to shine through them all. There's no ring system on this, or kind of dual ring system. It's just a basic ARGB fan. For the connections, you get 2 wires, of course, because you've got the power to be able to move them around and adapt the speed and stuff. And they do come with a little quirky, cool feature as well, which I think more fan manufacturers need to do. This is the connection for the power. It is a 4-pin PWM, and obviously that means you can rank them up on the motherboard to up to 1500 RPM if you need to. But they also come with a daisy chain. So there's not many fan manufacturers that actually do this. I know some of the Arctic fans actually do provide you with the little daisy chain on, and what it means is that if you have a limited amount of headers on your motherboard, you can actually daisy chain all the fans together and stick one onto the motherboard and it will control them all. It basically just takes a 3-pin to the next PWM fan, which means that the tachometer comes from the original fan that is plugged into the motherboard. So that's pretty cool to see because it means you can link as many as you want up. And again, considering they're so cheap, you could probably buy a lot of these. And to be honest, we actually did. We bought several boxes of them. We've got lots of boxes because we wanted to actually put a bit more of a fan inventory here in the studio so that we've got things for builds and stuff. So we've got lots and lots of fans and they didn't cost that much. But yeah, we've got the daisy chain there. When it comes to the ARGB connection, again, one of the things that I love on this is actually there's no proprietary connections. I do love it when brands do this because you can get motherboards with proper headers on them or standard headers on them, which means you can run RGB lighting and power from the motherboard, or pretty much you can buy a hub from anywhere that will have standard connections. When they put the proprietary ones on, it's really difficult to get all your RGB stuff working together. If they leave it as a standard, it does mean that you can connect it all together using some kind of hub. When we look at the actual connection for the ARGB, it is a 3-pin system. Like I say, it's standard, but again, they also include you a daisy chain connection. So if we just pop that off there, we can see that it is the opposite side, and that means that you can link multiple fans together. Again, that's really good because a lot of motherboards don't come with lots and lots of ARGB headers. You do need to generally get a hub for that, but if you're going to be loading these fans up, as long as you don't put too many together, and 3 or 4 should be perfectly fine when it comes to lighting, you can link them all up using these little daisy chains, and then you can actually just get the lights in to go throughout. That's actually a really super cool feature. I do love that because it means that you're going to make even more savings not having to buy any kind of hub. And it means it's perfect for people that are on a budget considering the price, as well as the connectivity they've given you, because it does mean that a lot of people with budget motherboards are limited on things like headers. If you're going for something along the AMD range of one of the low end 620 boards, I think the new ones are, or 520 boards, or 320 boards, they come with limited headers, so these fans are going to be perfect for that kind of stuff, or particularly older motherboards as well. And of course, we're not going to actually test these fully in a system, but we are going to hook them up to a power supply and just show you what kind of lighting effects they're going to provide, and also what kind of airflow you're going to get. We'll just do a basic paper test. We're not going to do anything substantial. They're so cheap that I'm sure you could actually be fine with these in any kind of system. So we'll get that power supply set up and then we'll show you some more about them. So we've got our funky DIY power supply set up, and this one actually just runs off the switch at the back, and we've connected it to a Cool Moon controller. This is an ARGB and fan controller, so it does come with standard connections, 4-pin PWM, 3-pin ARGB. They're not bad actually, they're pretty cheap, and you can connect them to motherboards so you can get all the syncing and that kind of stuff working. But we generally use it to test fans and stuff like that, because using the remote control, which is this one, we can simply raise the speed of the fans up or down, and we can change the lighting to see different types of effects. If we just plug the fan in, so the first one we're going to connect up is obviously our PWM connection, and it doesn't really matter where it goes, we'll just stick it into the end there. And obviously our 3-pin ARGB connection, we'll connect that in over here. Sometimes it's a little bit awkward, but we've managed to get that in. And then we just need to just turn the power supply on. So for some reason our controller is being a bit funny when it comes to the RGB. I don't know whether it's a problem with the controller or we need to replace it, but instead we've actually connected up a very basic one here, which has got a click switch on it. So we've got the RGB running, but at the moment the fan speed is on the slowest speed that it can, and you can't actually hear the fan at all. It's very, very quiet. There's not a lot of air coming off of it. I'm not 100% sure what the slowest speed of these fans are because they don't really tell you. We'll get a bit of paper and turn the fan around and we'll see how much air's actually coming off of it. So that's actually a pretty decent amount of air coming off the fan already. It is pushing it quite a bit. So that's pretty decent airflow, and we'll ramp the speed up a little bit just to see what kind of noise is there. So that should be about half speed now. There's plenty of cold air coming off there, and again, you can barely hear the fan. There's a little bit of fan noise now, so that's pretty good. We'll try the piece of paper again, just see how well it's blowing. As we can see, there's plenty of air coming through there. Now, will this actually go through a radiator or some kind of fine mesh? I'm not 100% sure. They're not the best in terms of pressure, but you're going to get a lot of airflow into a system, particularly if you use something like a push-pull on a radiator. We'll see how far the fan will go up though. So this controller appears to have 3 settings, and this is going to be the fastest. So this is running now at about 1500 RPM. There is a clear sound coming from them in terms of wind noise, but there's no rattling or any kind of high-pitched noises or anything like that. So let's test with the paper now, and we'll see how much air actually flowing off. So obviously you can see there's plenty of air coming off this now. And again, it's not really as loud as I thought it was going to be. They're actually pretty quiet fans. So I think Thermalright have done a pretty decent job. And the RGB lighting doesn't look bad. It's nice and bright. It does come from the center and come out into the fins. And then when it's actually installed into more of a dark place, and we were doing a bit of testing with this before, the outer rim of the fan does kind of shine the light off of it, and it kind of looks like a ring system. Not 100%, it's not as bright as like the ring systems that you buy for fans, but it does actually have this nice little glow in there with the way that they've angled the fan shroud round, so that looks pretty cool. I'm actually super impressed with these fans. I think they are perfect for the price that you pay, and the average price on these, particularly if you're buying them in the pack of 3, you can buy them individually, but they seem really expensive if they're individually. They seem cheaper at the moment if you buy a pack of 3, which is pretty crazy. But yeah, we'll put some links in the description below if you want to go check them out. I'm sure they won't last long, so you want to jump on them pretty quick. But it's good to know that some brands out there do have our backs when it comes to the budget stuff, and particularly when they look as nice as this. They've got all the standard connections, things that you generally don't get from budget things. I know a lot of the fan systems out there that I've been checking out and looking for because, like I said before, I wanted to rebuild the inventory that we've got here for when we do builds and stuff. They tend to come in multi-packs of like 3 to 5 fans, but then you have to have separate controllers, and which means you're going to buy the same fans again and have additional controllers, which is just super annoying. I'd much prefer to get something like this Cool Moon controller, which is all the standard connections, have standard connection fans. And that way, particularly for us moving it from system to system, maybe that system has an actual standard connection on the motherboard, and that's what we want to use. And this is that kind of perfect setup for that. So make sure you go check them out. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you like the kind of content and you want us to have a look at more fans. They do these in a white. Maybe I should get some white ones too for when we do some kind of white build or when we want to show that off. I don't know, let me know in the comments below. Should we do that, or should we just look at a different brand and get a bit more of a flavour of design? But I'm going to go and have some fun with these. We're going to do some builds. You'll probably see these in an upcoming build that we're going to be doing. We do have a case coming that we're going to be doing a review on, and if you want to see, we might use these fans in that case, so you'll actually get to see them in proper flare and inside something. But yeah, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you in the next one.